Have you ever noticed someone you love slowly changing in ways that are almost invisible at first but somehow feel different? Maybe they are eating less, maybe they are sleeping more, or perhaps they have grown quieter in conversations where they once had so much to say. These changes often do not announce themselves loudly. Instead, they arrive gently, like whispers, so subtle that many families overlook them until much later. And when they finally recognize what was happening, it is often too late to prepare or to say the things that mattered most. Many of us believe that when old age ends in death, it happens suddenly, like a switch being turned off. But for most, it is not like that. The body, with its deep wisdom, begins a slow process of letting go. It does not stop all at once. It signals in quiet ways, sending messages through changes in appetite, energy, mood, or even breath. These signs do not mean your loved one is broken or failing. They mean the body is preparing for rest. One of the earliest and most telling changes is a gradual loss of weight. At first, it seems harmless, almost unimportant. A belt no longer needs to be tightened. A favorite blouse or sweater begins to hang more loosely on the shoulders. A wedding ring slips more easily from the finger. Families may explain it away as just aging or a smaller appetite, but often, weight loss in the final year is not just about food. It is about the body conserving energy, redirecting its strength inward, inside. The digestive system begins to slow. Meals take longer to process. Nutrients are absorbed less efficiently, and hormones that once signaled hunger no longer send the same strong messages. Even when the plate is full, the body may not make use of the food as it once did. Muscle mass fades, a process called sarcopenia, leaving the person weaker and more easily fatigued. The sense of taste may dull, and food that once brought joy now feels bland. Even the simple act of eating can become tiring, leading to skipped meals or unfinished plates. Families often respond with love and urgency. They prepare favorite dishes, bring desserts, or buy protein shakes, hoping to reverse the decline. But weight loss at this stage is rarely something that can be solved with more food. It is not a battle to be fought, but a change to be understood. The most compassionate response is to shift focus from forcing nutrition to offering comfort. Small, easy-to-eat foods like soups, puddings, or slices of fruit may bring more peace than large, overwhelming meals. A warm cup of tea or broth may mean more to your loved one than a plate filled with casseroles. I remember the story of a man named Harold who had spent his life enjoying hearty meals. Meatloaf, potatoes, and pecan pie were his favorites. But in his final year, all he wanted was tea and toast. His son tried everything, bringing barbecued ribs, homemade casseroles, and even high-protein drinks. But one day, Harold smiled softly and said, "I just like hearing the kettle boil. That's enough for me now." From that moment, they shared tea together every afternoon. No pressure, no expectations, just the comfort of being together. That ritual became more nourishing than any plate of food could ever be. Weight loss in the final year is not about numbers on a scale. It is about dignity, comfort, and presence. When you see it happening, remember that it is not always something to fix. Instead, it is an opportunity to sit closer, to ask how they feel rather than how much they have eaten, and to remind them that love, not calories, is what matters most in these moments. Another quiet but powerful sign is a deep and persistent fatigue, a kind of weariness that no amount of sleep can cure. This is not the normal tiredness that comes after a busy day or a restless night. It is something heavier, an exhaustion that shows itself even in the morning. Before the day has begun, rising from bed feels difficult. Walking to the kitchen requires effort. A short conversation may leave a person drained and ready to rest again. This kind of fatigue does not pass because it is not about lack of sleep. It is the body's way of slowing down, conserving the little energy it has left inside. The heart may no longer pump as strongly, which means less oxygen reaches the muscles in the brain. The lungs may not expand as fully, leaving breath shallow. The body's ability to turn food into usable energy slows down. So even after eating, the fuel is not there. With less strength available, movement becomes harder, and with less movement, muscles weaken even more. It becomes a cycle of fatigue and stillness that is nearly impossible to break. For families, this change can feel painful. It may look as though a loved one is giving up or losing interest in life. But in truth, the body itself is setting new limits, quietly asking for gentleness. The best way to respond is not to push them to do more, but to honor their slower rhythm. A peaceful afternoon in a soft chair, the sunlight falling across the room, or the simple act of holding a warm cup in their hands can bring more comfort than encouragement to walk farther or stay awake longer. Presence matters more than performance when fatigue settles in as a constant companion. Another change often begins to surface, one that can be even harder for families to face. The mind, which once carried sharpness and memory, begins to grow quieter. At first, the difference is subtle. A loved one who used to join every conversation now listens more than they speak. They nod politely, smile at the right moments, but their responses seem delayed or distant. Sometimes they repeat familiar stories, not realizing they already told them. Other times, they fall silent, their eyes drifting toward a place that feels far away. This is not simply forgetfulness, the kind we all experience now and then. It is a gradual withdrawal, an exhaustion of the mind as circulation slows and oxygen reaches the brain in the smaller amounts. The pathways that once carried language, memory, and emotion begin to tire. It becomes harder to follow a quick conversation, to remember recent events, or to react with the same energy as before. Families may misread this as disinterest, or worse, as rejection. Yet what is truly happening is that the mind, much like the body, is choosing stillness. The emotional impact of this change can be profound. A spouse may feel hurt when their partner no longer responds with the same warmth. Children may ache when a parent seems less engaged, forgetting details of their lives or showing little reaction to important news. These moments can feel like tiny losses, as though the person you love is slipping away piece by piece. But it is important to understand that this is not a choice, nor a measure of love. It is the natural process of the brain slowing down, conserving energy, and letting go. And in these times, the most powerful response is not correction but presence. There is no need to remind them of every forgotten name or to insist they remember every detail. What matters most is the feeling you create together. Sit beside them even when silence fills the room. Hold their hand even if they do not squeeze back. Speak softly, even if the response is faint. Love at this stage is not measured by conversation, but by connection, the warmth of touch, the tone of voice, the comfort of simply being near. I once heard about a woman named Clara, whose husband James had always been the storyteller in their family. In his final year, he began speaking less and less, until the home was filled with silence. At first, Clara tried to fill the space with her own words, telling long stories in hopes of sparking his memory. But one afternoon, as she sat holding his hand without saying a word, she realized he was calmer than she had seen him in weeks. In that moment, she understood. He no longer needed conversation. He needed companionship. "He may not speak to me," she later said, "but I know he feels me here." Emotional withdrawal often follows cognitive decline. Smiles come less often. Laughter fades. Reactions to joyful or sad news seem muted. To the outside observer, it may look like indifference, but it is not that the heart has stopped caring. It is that the brain no longer has the same ability to express those feelings. Deep inside, love still remains. What you can offer is patience, acceptance, and gentle reassurance that they are still valued, still seen, still loved. As the mind grows quieter, the world outside may begin to feel overwhelming. Crowded rooms, loud conversations, or sudden changes in environment may cause more confusion than joy. That is why creating a peaceful setting matters so much. A calm space, soft lighting, familiar music, or the comfort of family photos can bring a sense of security and ease. These small gestures remind your loved one of who they are and where they belong, even when words are hard to find. This stage is difficult for families because it feels as though you are losing someone twice, first in their memory and later in their presence. But instead of focusing on what is slipping away, you can focus on what remains. And what remains, even in silence, is the bond of love. It does not require words to be felt. It does not depend on memory to exist. It lives in presence, in touch, in the quiet assurance that you are still together, and that you will remain there until the very end. As the mind begins to grow quieter, the body often reveals its own subtle messages in new invisible ways. One of the clearest changes is the way the body responds to illness or injury. A cold that once cleared up in a few days may now linger for weeks. A small scrape or bruise heals more slowly than before, sometimes reopening before it ever fully closes. Infections, whether in the lungs, the skin, or the urinary tract, return again and again, leaving the person weaker each time. At first, these episodes may seem like isolated problems, but when viewed together, they speak of a deeper shift. The body's defenses are growing quieter. The immune system, which has carried us faithfully through decades of challenges, becomes less forceful in later life. White blood cells move more slowly to fight infection. Tissues that once repaired themselves quickly now take far longer to recover. Inflammation, which should rise and then resolve, sometimes lingers, leaving behind fatigue and fragility. For someone in their final year, these changes become even more pronounced. Families who expect the sudden fevers and dramatic symptoms of earlier illnesses may be surprised to see something much softer instead. Confusion, sleepiness, or simply a lack of appetite. These are often the only signals that the body is struggling with infection. The natural response for most families is urgency, trips to the hospital, new prescriptions, and repeated rounds of treatment become part of the routine. And sometimes these efforts are necessary, but there is also another truth, harder to accept. In the final year, the body often chooses comfort over battle. Fighting infections becomes less of a priority, conserving strength instead for the quiet work of turning inward. This is when the role of care begins to shift. Instead of focusing only on curing, attention can move towards soothing. A glass of water offered gently, a soft blanket tucked in carefully, skin kept clean and moisturized. These small acts can mean as much as medicine. Gentle movement to avoid bed sores, fresh sheets that smell of home, or a calm voice reminding them they are safe. All of these can provide a sense of healing even when the illness itself lingers. I once knew of a woman named Margaret who suffered from repeated infections in her final year. At first, her family rushed her to the hospital each time, desperate for solutions. But after months of exhausting treatments, they realized what Margaret wanted most was not another round of antibiotics, but the peace of staying in her own bed. They began to focus on comfort, hydration, warmth, and presence rather than constant interventions. And in that shift, Margaret found more rest, and her family found more peace. These quiet battles remind us that the body is no longer trying to recover as it once did. It is signaling that it no longer wants to fight so hard, and instead wishes to be supported gently. Healing, at this stage, does not always mean returning to health. Sometimes it means creating wholeness in the present moment through love, comfort, and care. As infections and slow healing become part of daily life, another even more profound shift often begins. The rhythm of breath and circulation. The body speaks most clearly through its breathing, and in the final year. This rhythm often changes. Breaths may become slower, softer, with longer pauses between them. At times, the breathing grows irregular, a few deep breaths followed by moments of stillness before returning again. This pattern, known as Cheney-Stokes breathing, can be unsettling to hear if you do not expect it, but it is not painful. It is simply the body's way of easing into rest. One breath at a time. Circulation changes as well. Hands and feet may grow cooler. Even when the room is warm, the skin can take on a bluish or mottled tone, especially around the lips, fingers, and in toes. These changes occur because the body is conserving blood for the most vital organs, pulling away from the edges to preserve the heart and the brain. Even the smallest effort, turning in bed, sitting up, or speaking a few words, can leave someone short of breath. Slowly, they spend more hours resting with eyes closed, speaking less often, conserving what little energy remains. For families, these changes can be frightening. Watching the pauses in breath or feeling coldness in the hands can stir deep worry. The instinct is to encourage deeper breathing, to rub warmth into the skin, to do something to bring them back. But most often, these are not crises to be fixed. They are rhythms to be honored. The body is not breaking, it is finding its way toward peace. Creating comfort in this stage is about making the environment calm and safe. A softly lit room, fresh air moving gently, or a humidifier to ease dryness can bring relief. Offering a sip of water, if they can swallow comfortably, may soothe them more than anything else. Sometimes oxygen or light medication can help, but often the most powerful gift is presence. Sitting quietly, holding a hand, speaking in a steady, loving voice. These things assure your loved one that they are not alone, that they are safe, and that they are deeply cherished. I once heard a daughter describe sitting by her father's bed as his breathing changed. At first, every pause felt like a jolt of panic, but over time she began to see it differently. It was like watching the tide go out, she said, slow, steady, and calm. What had first terrified her became a rhythm she could accompany with her own breath, a gentle reminder that she was present with him all the way. As circulation grows weaker and breathing slows into its new rhythm, the person you love may spend more and more of their time resting. Their eyes may close for longer periods. Their words may come less often. And when they do speak, the effort may be brief. This is not a sign of indifference or neglect. It is the body's final expression of wisdom, saving every bit of energy for what matters most. For families, these days can feel heavy with uncertainty. The pauses between breaths seem endless. The coolness in their hands feels like a warning. Yet if you step back, you may also notice something else, a kind of peace settling in, a quiet acceptance that life is reaching its natural close. This is the moment when the instinct to do can give way to the power of simply being for so much of our lives. Care is about action feeding, helping, protecting, fixing. But at the end, care takes on a different form. It becomes less about medicine and more about presence, less about lengthening days and more about filling those days with dignity. When you understand the 5 subtle signs: weight loss, deep fatigue, cognitive withdrawal, repeated infections, and changes in breathing and circulation, you begin to see that the journey is not about fear, but about preparing to walk beside your loved one with calm and compassion. I remember a nurse once saying, "The final gift we can give is not to extend life at all costs, but to make the time that remains as soft as possible." Those words stay with me because they capture what truly matters in the final year. It is not about whether someone eats one more meal or takes one more step. It is about whether they feel safe as they rest, whether they feel seen even in their silence, and whether they feel loved until the very last breath. This reflection is not meant to cause despair. In fact, it can be a source of comfort. Recognizing the signs allows you to prepare not in panic, but in peace. You can use this awareness to say what is in your heart, to share memories, to hold hands longer, to create moments of stillness that will stay with you long after. Instead of fighting the inevitable, you can walk alongside it, turning the end into a sacred space filled with connection rather than chaos. You may wonder, what can I do if I don't know the right words? The truth is, you do not need perfect words. You do not need all the answers. Sometimes, the most powerful act of love is simply sitting quietly, holding a hand, and letting your loved one feel that they are not alone. A calm presence can bring more relief than any treatment, more peace than any explanation. It tells them, without words, you are safe, you are loved, I am here. Families often describe these moments as bittersweet. They are filled with sorrow at the approaching loss, yet also filled with gratitude for the chance to be present, to truly see the person they love without distraction. In this sense, the final year, though painful, can also be deeply meaningful. It can be a time when love speaks louder than ever, not through action or conversation, but through presence. As you walk through this season, remember that the body's slowing is not a failure. It is a natural part of life, a turning inward that deserves respect. When you stop measuring by the scale, by the steps taken, or by the conversations held, you begin to see the beauty in simply being together. A whispered word, a gentle smile, a quiet breath, these become treasures. So let this be your reminder. The greatest gift you can give in the final year is not more days, but better days. Days that are softer, calmer, and filled with dignity. Days where love is felt, even when words are gone. Presence is not just enough, it is everything. And if you find yourself in this place now, caring for someone you love as they show these 5 signs, take heart, you are not alone. Many have walked this path before you. And while it is never easy, it can be sacred. In the end, it is not about adding to the number of breaths, but about filling each breath that remains with comfort, compassion, and love.